There are elements of the music in the gameplay music where we have a layering system where there might be several tracks of music, and then there'll be related musical elements that come in according to random rules structured. So quite often, if you were to find some music in the MOPAC, you may not be hearing the whole thing because some of the music is intended to be heard with overlays on top. So we do have a layering system in place for the music.
So I was going to ask, in the previous two games, especially the first Diablo, a lot of the soundtrack included a lot of, I'd say, ambient sounds like moaning, groaning, sighing. There's that great squishy sound when you'd kill Hidden. Were you able to include some things like that in this game, or?
Well, actually, there is a ton of that kind of stuff. We went out of our way, and we're not actually done doing it. So there's some in the beta, but there will be more in the first act when we ship. We created a lot of spots all over the game. You'll find this everywhere where you could go stand for 20 minutes and not hear anything. And then maybe the next time you stand there, you'll hear a bunch of creature noises off in the distance. And we've got that kind of randomization all over the game so that maybe by the time you play the game through the third time, which somebody might do that.
Yeah, there's lots of goodies hidden in, I know for sure, in the music tracks that, did I hear that? And there's no way for you when you're playing to actually rewind the soundtrack. So you're going to have to keep playing for, another couple days before you can ever verify that what you really heard wasn't a hallucination,
Was that a jaw harp I heard?
Was that a machine gun? No.
Hi, my name is Rob. I'm an aspiring sound designer for video games. This question is for Russell and Chris. You guys were talking about implementation of sound effects in the video game. I just got finished making a Flash game with a 4-person team, and I had to do a lot of my sound work over and over again by their request, by the artist's request, because my sound effects did not match the length of the little animatic of when an enemy died or when they shot something. I was wondering what the relationship is between a sound designer and an artist, because you talked about making like different 5 to 10 variations of a certain sound effect as far as length. Like, did artists ever tell you to go back and do something again because something didn't match as far as length or intensity?
Usually that would be QA who comes out and says that it's off sync or something like that. We do work very closely with the artists at times. And basically, we just kind of, just mess around and get things going. So, you want to fill in for that?
Well, I think Blizzard has a culture of iteration, so it's no different for the sound department. So, I think when you're working in this field, you need to be ready to tweak and tweak again, and then again, sometimes QA is what catches it, because after the sound and everything is left our desk, if you will, the artist might go back and tweak something. And I think another dimension to what you might be talking about too is, I think a lot of really effective sound design happens when the mass, the weight feels right. It's really easy when you're recording source material, especially in a quiet studio, to actually have it either not sound big enough or maybe sound too thumpy or something that just the human brain's pretty powerful computer, and it can tell you subconsciously that it isn't quite hooking up. There's something often wrong with that sense of weight or mass, and so that's always really tricky. And there is an analogy to that in the visual arts. You talk to special effects people, and they say, they make fake rocks for the movies because real rocks look fake and fake rocks look real on films. Well, it's often the same kind of thing that happens with sound.
One last thing I'd like to say is to keep it more granular and more individual sounds. And if it's a Flash game or something like that, you'll probably have individual timings of when these things fire off. Instead of doing a full soundtrack, that's how things kind of get out of sync a lot of the time. So the more granular it is, or if if something is going to loop, keep it looping until needs to be turned off. And usually that's all handled in the data side. So try and keep it as minute as possible, as granular as possible. And that helps a lot in the end, because then they can just move those timings around too, and it doesn't become your job to do that all the time as well.
Cool. Get a few more in here.
Hi, I'm also a sound engineer. I have a compression limiting question. I've always found in the Blizzard games, you guys run like 3 tracks, and they're all gorgeously compressed. And I've always wondered how you deal with final limiting and get it where you can blend all these tracks, yet I can still hear every whisper in every track, and then there's a loud track, and the limiting never peaks or is clipped. It's always gorgeous. So any advice about compression and limiting, I would love.
I just want to say that is a master compliment, and we appreciate that with all our hearts. Thank you. I'll let the guys speak to the compression and limiting, but I know one thing that I do in mixing the music is I work at very low volumes when I'm mixing, because at a low playback level, if you can hear the bass and the treble and the mid-range and the melody and it's all there, even at a level that you can easily speak over and have a conversation over, chances are it'll sound good when you turn it up to face melting levels, which eventually we do, but there's all that. I think that reference listening level is really important to be consistent. As far as compression, maybe, I don't know, anything else anyone want to add?
Well, I should say, in the form of the game, it's good to leave plenty of headroom back at runtime. So you don't necessarily have to compress everything a lot. I like to compress things when I want to make it really aggressive and big and in your face. And when we go into the game and implement this stuff, nothing is at 0 dB. Not a lot of it's at 0 dB. We leave a lot of headroom in there so you have high dynamics and things can really jump out at you. So that's what I try and go for.
The audio world is weird. 0 is loudest.
Awesome, thank you.
Hello, and thank you very much. I am a student who's getting ready to graduate in 5 weeks with music business sound engineering emphasis. And I'm also an opera singer and do voiceover, so I'm curious how much there is a crossover with you guys as an entire team for the artists who do the speaking voiceovers with pig sounds and as well as the music making. How much crossover is there?
It's Andrea's question.
I'll start off. As I kind of alluded to earlier, way before we even get into the studio, when we're in the casting process, actually before casting, when I'm working with the dev teams and we're talking about voices, I do pull up the kind of music work in progress. Again, before we even find our actors and start working on that, I want to hear what they're doing. I want to hear, because I'm really into music. I love sound. And so when I hear their work in progress, it really sets the tone. It sounds kind of goofy, but I really do get into my headspace. Even when if I'm going to go through auditions, let's say I get in hundreds for each character that we do, before I even review the auditions, I will sit at my desk with headphones on and really listen to what they're working on musically. Because it really, anybody who loves music knows you just get those sounds in your head and you're in a different place. So for me, for my part of it, I really do, and it's especially hard for me, not hard, but because I work on Star 2 and WoW, it's important that I do listen to their assets because I need to clear my head of WoW, clear my head of Star 2, and really readjust and get into the D3 world. So hence I really rely on their music a lot to get me there so I can find the perfect voices for our characters. So in that way, that's how I collaborate.
You also worked with a really, actually we all worked with a really incredible voice actor named Dee Baker, who can make the most unhuman sounds. And actually, I believe the sound designers were directing those sessions, yes?
Dee Baker did some work prior to me working at Blizzard for the Fallen family that Joseph can probably talk about a little bit.
Well, Dee is an amazing talent. He can stand in front of you and make noises with his mouth that don't sound like they're coming from a human, and it's kind of scary. He'll put objects in his mouth. He'll put his fingers in his mouth. He will do whatever it takes to make a really strange noise, and it's just amazing working with him because he's game for anything, and he can just about pull anything off. It's really quite stunning.
So that's that crossover between found sounds for creatures and then using the power of the human voice. And I suggest you maybe hunt his name down on YouTube, because if you can find some footage of him doing his thing, it's mind blowing. I think, is he in the collector's edition? DVD
Yes, he
video?
is. You'll see him in the
Good.
collector's edition.
Excellent.
I love your shirt, by the way. Very cool.
Next.
We have time for just a few more questions.
First of all, thank you guys all so much for making sounds an experience unto itself in the games. I really appreciate it. This question is for the composers. How much do you balance collaboration between each other on your own individual pieces in the game, starting through the conceptual phase through all the way to the finished product?
Well, I think we all have complementary talents. There's some overlap of our areas of speciality, but there are so we do some internal casting that maybe one person's tends to do the more heavy stuff, or maybe someone does the more humorous stuff. But we also have to contend with the fact that Blizzard's a real busy studio, so sometimes it comes down to which one of us is available. So some magic formula of the right person for the right job based on our individual strengths and our availability, because there's always a WoW patch to work on, and of course Heart of the Swarm's coming. So
we talk a bit amongst ourselves quite often. We try and get together, whether it's in the hallway or structured meetings, but whether it's a year before the next WoW expansion, we might have some conversations about that, whether it's for the next StarCraft 2. We're always talking about things like that, or even in a team meeting where we're talking about all sound related things. Musical ideas come up, so we just try and keep the conversation open.
it was also clear on this one that it made great sense to bring Lawrence in, because we wanted to explore things that we didn't know guitars or related instruments could do. And I think Lawrence spent half his income on this game on crazy new instruments.
Yeah, I got into some really interesting things, just to, especially like the hammer dulcimer and stuff like that, to get all that extra dimension in the texture. But I gather my next job is to give guitar lessons to a pig. Is that the is that the plan?
And I was kidding. You don't have to ever twist a guitar player's arm to buy more gear. Next.
This is going to be our last question.
So to start off, when you when you were doing the Wrath of the Lich King, there is one sound in the Nexus. It's for the soundtrack. It was pulled straight out of Age of Empires 3, and I love that because I heard this iconic sound. I think it was like spawning some unit, and it perfectly matched with the music, and it just gave me kind of nostalgia for other old games that are also just fantastic. You guys, we're right in the same level of, if not better. And my question is, when you're doing layering, especially the music layering for battles versus just ambient, how do you structure that? Like, what's your theory behind it so that it's not going to be too jarring and not too impossible for them to work through and keep going on the level?
Well, I guess there's different approaches in the different IPs in Diablo 3, since we're talking about that. There's one boss fight right now in the beta, and that's a Skeleton King. What you'll find in the approach to a lot of the boss music is it's more of a game component, where it's meant to increase the tension and increase the anxiety of fighting the boss, rather than like, you better hit, we're gonna get the boss, it's more like, oh no, the boss is coming, here it is, it's more like, oh man, can't somebody turn the music off, it's confusing me, I gotta kill the Skeleton King. So it's just the context that the game places for us calls for a certain approach, a certain kind of music, if that makes any sort of sense in my crazy way.
Everyone, we have to close. I wanted to say again, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. And keep playing Blizzard games. Enjoy Diablo 3 very soon. Trademark, patent pending.
Thank you for SoundCast. Coming up next at 2 o'clock, you're on the developer stage, is StarCraft 2 Heart of the Swarm campaign and lore Q&A panel.